right.
Board members, it's 5:30. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Our first item is our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Vice Chair, could you read our mission statement?
The mission of the Marshall Public School District is to educate, support, and prepare all learners for success.
Thank you. Need a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
I'll second.
Any additions? Hearing none, please vote. It is approved. Moving on to our presentation, welcome Ms. Kay. The floor is yours.
Pardon me?
Mary. Kay,
Usually.
floor is yours.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're ready. All right. Well, I stopped in to visit with you guys about some of the activity that we do with our 7th and 8th graders with regard to the MCIS survey, and that is the Minnesota Career Information System. There's several reasons that we do MCIS at the middle school. And one of the primary reasons is listed here. It's in Minnesota state statute that it requires that all students must have career exploration and future planning tools before entering their 9th grade year. In addition to that, we good. So there's several different things that MCIS offers. And you'll see in this one where it says MCIS Junior, that is the one that middle school uses for both 7th and 8th grade. The one in the top left-hand corner where it's just MCIS and the Navy, that's the one that is offered at the high school. So it's aligned at the high school level with juniors, I think, at the high school that Brenda Kellen has a careers class. So once our kids are done at the 7th and 8th grade and they have all of their material in an electronic format, yeah, please. I'm so sorry, Jeremy. Then that information is still available to them once they're a junior in high school. They can take a look at the work that they've already completed as 7th and 8th graders. So it still sits there. So Brenda walks them through with more depth at that junior level through MCIS. There's also a My Plan up there. We used to do that at the middle school, which was a pretty condensed form of this. Years ago when it was free, we used My Plan. When they attached a cost to that, then we moved to the MCIS Junior, which just gave us a lot more depth for what we do at the middle school level and would satisfy some of the goals that were included in with the college and career ready. There's also practice tests, bottom left-hand corner would tell you a little bit about that. But MCIS offers a great deal of information for our kids at every level.
What class is this being taught in?
Pardon me, Jeff?
What class is this being taught in?
It's at the 7th and 8th grade level, but it's all focused within the advisory classes. So each one, we have 8 to 10 advisory teachers per grade level. They spend about a half hour a day in advisory and a half hour with another half hour a day with that same teacher in a reading class. So there's a combination of times when our kids get the same teacher for those 2 classes throughout the day. There's times when they combine it so that it's all MCIS, maybe for a 2-week period in both reading and advisory. Otherwise, they just spend that half hour in advisory. So these are just a few more reasons why we do the MCIS. It's a quality career introduction tool recognized by the state. It offers a great deal of life skills, not just the one as far as the college career. And it's also used at the high school level, and we talked about that. And then additionally, it is in the middle school SKIP goals. So both at the 7th grade level that we do a couple of different lessons there, which is both the employability skill survey, first of all, but secondly, an activity that's called this or that. It's really decision-making skills. So those are 2 different units they do at the 7th grade level. And each one of those units lasts for a good couple of weeks. So to think about it that way too. And then at the 8th grade level, the bottom goal there, we do the learning style survey, the career interest inventory, the reality check, and then assessing the career clusters. All of those last, I would say, more like 3 months at the 8th grade level. And kids put a lot of time and energy studying different things, and they certainly do it at different levels too. Some kids are extremely interested in it. They do it with more depth. Other kids might have a pretty good idea and it's pretty concise, that they're able to get through it and have a pretty good understanding of what it all offers. There's some minimum standards that they have to complete there, but it can take our kids anywhere from 1 to 3 months, I'd say, to get through the information. 7th grade MCIS lessons, this is just a little bit more information as far as the detail goes, and basically what our businesses, local businesses throughout the state have been surveyed, and what are the kind of things that you need our kids to come out of high school with on a minimum basis. So there's a number of things listed there, and they're all pretty general practices and things that you would expect any of our students to graduate high school with. So it's not coming out of 8th grade with, it's coming out of high school level with. And just for our kids to get a better understanding of what we're looking for and ultimately what some of the goals are. We also go through a decision-making matrix, and then identifying the important decisions that they'll be making in the next 2 to 6 years. And, you know, from the time they're 7th graders until they're a freshman in college or the first year out of high school, the massive decisions that our kids make, it's pretty unbelievable when we sit back and look at it. Some of you have your kids in those years right now, or you recently went through those, but it's significant, you know, when we look back to those years. When I was a kid, I didn't even realize how massive they were, you know, but it's one of the things that we really want our kids to understand, is that they are massive and significant decisions. We just want them more than anything to give some real thought to those areas. Many of our kids don't have these discussions at home, so it's a different level of conversation for our teachers, depending on what kind of conversations our kids come from. Some kids come from a great deal of conversation, others have none at all. And so it's quite a complex conversation in the classroom, and teachers measuring how much to go into and what not to go into without boring some of the kids, and other kids are like overwhelmed. What? I'm going to do that. So a little bit of everything there though. The employability skills survey is also at the 7th grade level, and it's really a matrix of what the basics are. On the far left-hand side, I'm sorry that isn't any bigger for you, but on the far left side is the you need some work in these areas of speaking, listening, reading, writing, and math. And on the far right side is high proficiency levels of each one of those and descriptors for each of them. So the kids can see what those very specific descriptors are to be successful in those areas. Then we move on to 8th grade, and those 4 areas that we focus on at the 8th. You each got, I think, one of these, the career clusters. On that career clusters, you'll see that there's 6 different career clusters areas, but in the center, there's a foundation knowledge and skills that is really the foundation of each one of those clusters. And our teachers spend a great deal of time in just introducing this information. Do keep in mind, this is all electronic, so the kids are on the computer the whole time, pretty much the whole time within the MCIS surveys. But they do learn about, generally speaking, 520 occupations. They develop a personal portfolio and personal learning style plan. They research colleges, universities, and career schools. They gain understanding about their learning style, the auditory, visual, or tactile learning styles. They complete a reality check, which is kind of interesting for them when they have to answer survey questions to align with what they think they're going to do when they're out of school, and how much money they think they're going to make when they're out of school. And then they develop and improve skills for the future, and then they begin the development of resume building. So that is this piece. So after they spend some time on this piece that's up, there's an 80 question survey that they take just to find out the areas that they're most interested in. And it's kind of a combination of interest and strength. So the things that they're best at and the areas that that they really focus on, what they think they want to go into.
I don't remember what it was called, but when we were this age, the Army came in and gave us a test.
Oh.
Is that what it was called? Yeah, and it would come back and tell you what you should be or what your interests are. And I never got back. I wanted to be a professional athlete. But
What did you say it was called?
Army, the Army did that. It must have been all over the country. You guys got it too.
Yeah.
But that's similar to that surveyor test.
Yeah. You didn't get the professional athlete on that, so here we are
Gave up on that idea.
at a school board meeting. So I went in and took the 80 question survey just to see what it would give me and what kind of accuracy I felt like it was. And both Jen High and Margot Van Moore are behind the roots of helping the 7th and 8th grade teachers with the exploration of all of this and lining everything up. They do a phenomenal job of making sure that everything's in line for them, but they went in and did this as well. And then they were interested to see how the three of us did. So I'm on this next one. This is a result of my career clusters. And really it's fairly accurate. You'll see that my top 4 were ag, food, natural resources is first one, then education and training, health science, and then law, public safety, corrections. And really when you take a look at it on the career clusters, then it's in that first one's in that green area, which if you delve into all of those areas, it can align pretty easily to a number of different things, and mostly, excuse me, minor hobbies within that area when you think about gardening and outdoors kind of things. But in the career field, when you take a look at the blue area, then you can see education and training, the law, public safety, corrections, but overall, it's human services and career fields. So we each of the three of us found that it was really accurate in some of the measurements. So the inventory questions are pretty good. And then they take this little survey. It's really an activity that they take beside their career cluster results, and they answer a number of questions. They do some research as to the areas that they're most interested in to see if it aligns with everything within the rest of their career clusters and the other surveys that they do. So that would include, we want to make sure that they know where their learning styles are. And this one, in a different format, they start this one at 5th grade, just so that kids have a pretty good idea what their learning style is. It doesn't have the same level of depth that MCIS offers, but this one does give them a little bit of depth. And then we go into what the definition of each one of them is, and then study skills and different things that they can do to be more successful for each one of those areas. And clearly, most of us have a little bit of each one of those areas. We're not just solidly one or the other, but it does give you a little bit of a strength in some strategies and tools you can use when you find out that you're more of a visual learner than you are a tactile or auditory. So that is somewhat helpful for the kids too. We like to think it is. Then we go into our reality check to try to align what our career is and how much money we need to make in order to make ends meet. And that's what this next piece is. And Tricia, I don't know if this one can, oops. Am I doing that?
You want me to click on the link?
Yeah, click on that top one on that 13th slide. Let's see if we can get in there. Yeah, and then if you go log in right there, we aren't going to get in. Well, this is, I'll skip through this one, and it's just it's a 2-minute blurb where Dave reviews the things that he wants to do in his future and how much money he thinks he's going to make. He's going to make about 150,000 or 200,000. He's going to live in this big, beautiful home. He's going to have 3 vehicles, and you guys know the American dream. So it's just a reality check for kids, and they're all going, yeah, other than I'm going to be a basketball player instead of that. But so then they take the living expense survey, and some of the questions are listed here. I'm sorry, it kind of mumbles here, but where do you want to live? First of all, MCIS gives us opportunities in the state of Minnesota, but it doesn't take us outside of the state, so we don't get to compare to New York or San Francisco as far as learning living expenses. But we do talk about those things and what those align to and how it looks for our kids. Some of the questions are listed here. What type of home do you need? Are you going to live with your parents for the rest of your life at $0? Are you going to need a 1-bedroom apartment, a 2-bedroom, or a home for $1040 approximately? And it goes down and through utilities. It goes through the communication services. We talk about landlines in there, and most of the kids don't know what a landline is anymore. But maybe you could get by with that without a cell phone, and that is it's humorous for them anyway. Where you'll eat, the transportation, and then at the way bottom you'll see clothing, healthcare expenses, entertainment, taxes, everything's dealt with within that area. So when I took this one just off the, there we go. When I took this one the other day, I took it as though I'm an undergrad student or an undergrad grad, so a Bachelor of Science degree in different fields, what kind of money I would have to make in order to live in Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And this one includes your annual expenses, it includes your federal taxes, your state taxes, and this one says that I would need to make a minimum of $64,700. So then I'm offered this information as a result of that. And this information will give us everything aligned. So it aligns your career clusters with your learning styles, with your reality check, so that you can see which one of your 108 different occupations you might be able to do to make the money that you need to live that kind of a life on in Minneapolis-St. Paul. And literally mine offers 108, I only put a few up there, but it offers 108 different career opportunities. Then you can go in and you can study each one to know what kind of education you need to fulfill it, what kind of classes you might want to consider taking as a high school student, and then post-secondary, and what kind of college universities you want to go into. That is pretty much the gist of what we do with MCIS. Our goal is at the end of this time for kids to have a better understanding of who they are, where they're going, and how they might get there. Yeah. It's a pretty neat program, but anybody have any questions?
ASVAB, Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery Test.
That's what it was called?
What it was called, yeah.
That's pretty
I
good.
couldn't remember it.
Yeah. Basically identify what careers you could pursue and
Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good. Well, you guys have a good night. I'm gonna slide on out.
Moving on to our consent agenda, a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. It's approved. Moving on to our financials. I'll make a motion to discuss the financials. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
It's open.
not a lot to talk about. General fund, food service, transportation are all in line with the month. Community service funds, number's a little larger because that's the payments APE makes to their collaborative districts. Other than that, building construction fund, we'll see a little larger number there in February. We have a couple payouts come through.
Any questions? Hearing none, let's vote. It's approved. Anything to discuss on financials?
No, just when the board looks at the treasury report, I would always say the second page is probably one of the more tells. It's now that we have the revised budget done, looks a little clearer. We're actually a little more in line with previous years, maybe a little ahead, but yeah, it's always nice when we get the revised budget done. So I have a little better look, more true look at it.
Thank you. Board forum, board members, anybody have anything you'd like to bring up?
Two things. So I'm a liaison to Pride and the Tiger, and I don't recall if we've talked about the new scoreboard going up. And I didn't because I wasn't sure exactly where it was at, but apparently it's being installed here now, shortly. The Pride and the Tiger Foundation have funded to do a new video scoreboard in the gyms at the gym at the high school. It'll be more in line with what's at the Red Baron Ice Arena. So there's going to be some different opportunities for advertisers, announcements, student engagement in operation, and things like that. So it's pretty exciting for our school building, and also gratitude to Pride and the Tiger for taking that on. It'll be a great revenue source for the foundation, in addition to really benefiting our students' activities and programs. So I think that that's something that we should, if you see any of the Pride board members, to say thank you and take notice of.
And then I'm just going to add to that, with their purchase and addition of that for us, they're also budgeting for replacement after a certain number of years too. So they've worked out that as part of their plan with that. So it's really thinking ahead, so don't put it in and then it falls apart and we have to come up how we're going to pay for it years down the road. So.
And they've also replaced all the signage outside of the high school gym for all of the sponsors and the people who make the donations and sponsorships for Pride. So again, just notice the great look of those and notice the business names and make sure to say thank you. It's an incredible alliance that we have with Pride. And then the other, we are having a bond oversight committee meeting next week. So I think everything appears to continue to be on track since our last meeting we haven't met, but I would anticipate that that meeting will be updated at our next board meeting, but things continue to go along with the.
You know if all the advertising spaces are taken, or are they still looking for people?
I think they're always looking for people. I think they do have a fair number and have had some new people participating, or new businesses participating this year, from what I understand. So Krista Biella has taken over as director, and I think she'll do a great job with her contacts and connections in the community. So.
Very good. Anybody else? Moving on to our administrator's report.
A few things to share tonight. My report, just want to update you a little bit with Return to Learn. We have a lot of things going on there. This next week, we're bringing our elementaries back full face-to-face. We're really excited about that. We'll start on Tuesday. Part of, I know we'll get a message out tomorrow to families too, but some questions are on Friday and Monday, why those are no school days. Monday was already scheduled that way, but the state's requiring 2 full prep days for staff, making that transition back to a full face-to-face. So that's what's going on for those 2 days. They're prep days for staff required by MDE with this change. We're also starting to think about how we're going to bring secondary back and when that's going to be. So we've had some conversations with MDH and with public health about what that's going to look like. Meeting actually tomorrow with the administrators at both of those sites to try and get a plan together to bring back and share with you guys too. But I don't have a date for it yet, but we're hoping to do it as soon as possible.
Has there been any conversation at all from either the MDH or MDE on secondary? Has there been anything really?
No, they indicated there was going to be some additional guidance. We haven't seen it yet, so that's part of we're kind of wanting to see that. Right now, we're still working off the guidance they gave us for elementary, and I'm hoping some of those things, just because elementary looks so much different than secondary does with some of those things. So lunchrooms, for example, doing lunch in the classrooms at high school would be tough. So some of those things we're trying to put out. That's what we're trying to put together. One of the things that is required with this plan that might be the same with secondary is that they're called a rolling start. So we didn't have to do it with our elementary because we already had this. We had talked about dates prior to the change of the guidance. We were kind of grandfathered in, if you will. But the rolling start will apply for a secondary. So the requirement with that is no more than 3 grade levels per building in a 2-week period. And that's hard because both of ours are 4 grade levels. So that's one of the things I'm hoping could be different in the secondary because most high schools are 4 grades. So otherwise, we'd probably look at doing 2 grades and then the next 2 grades. Conversation at the high school has been around maybe looking at which 2 grades have the highest failure rates and bringing those 2 grades in for the first round. Middle school, we'd keep 5th and 6th together and 7th and 8th together for that rolling start. But a lot of details are still not, but we are working on it. The other thing I just wanted to call out in my report, we're looking at the COVID testing. That was one of the updates from MDE as well, that we're required to offer it for staff, and staff can choose whether or not they want to participate. So last week we had our first session of that. Takes place at each of the sites, and it's once every 2 weeks. So it'll happen next week again. Last week we had about 70 people participate. So it was a pretty good turnout for our first one of that. And just with those results to just point out, they sign up and we manage a location for it, but we don't get the results. Those are all still private medical things with the staff members. So
Were there any, do we find out though if there's, I mean, in terms of positivity?
if they're positive, yeah, if they're positive, MDH, just like if they went to the hospital and tested, MDH would contact and the staff would notify us.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's self-report or MDH calls once they get it too. But yep.
And were there any asymptomatic positives? I mean,
Not that I've heard of. Yeah, our intern rates have been very low. So yeah, those numbers look really good. And I don't know if you're following those county numbers yet too, but we have dropped down into the not red category anymore. So
well,
it's
Minnesota
49.
has, I mean, I've how the numbers keep falling for Minnesota as a whole.
Right, and we kind of anticipated kind of a rise again after Christmas, and we haven't seen that. So yeah, that's really encouraging as we're looking at doing a face-to-face return. So yeah, good points there. Early childhood, Tiffany talked in hers about just back in session. She's excited about that. So they have started using some of their new spaces over at Parkside in the addition there, and that's going really well. The staff is really excited about being in there and having them to spread out, especially with the ECFE, with the family education pieces of what's taking place over there. She also mentioned some baby bags, some new opportunities that they're doing there, where families meet with ECFE teacher and learn about programming, get parenting questions answered, and they get a bag with infant materials like bibs and board books and that sort of thing. So something new that they're very excited about there. Parkside, Darcy talked about her PBIS. Really, her whole report was about PBIS this time. The model, this was interesting data she had in there. The research shows that thousands of hours of instructional time are recovered using PBIS. So up to 4 days of student instruction per year, which is pretty good data there. Teaching, monitoring, supporting consistent behavior expectations is really the goal with that. It's been hard this year because a lot of that things around the big group things and pulling kids in and having the celebrations, and that's part of the motivator for kids. But our building's doing a nice job finding other ways to make that happen this year. Tiger passports, tiger tickets, some virtual celebration things and different things they've done there. Still celebrating good behavior, recognizing what's going well is how that works. A lot of time goes into teaching the expectations, not just assuming kids know the expectations. So Darcy had a nice report about that today. West Side, Pete talked about return to face-to-face and just some of the things they're doing at West Side, setting up for that, getting tables, desks, chairs kind of rearranged again to have room for everyone back in the rooms next week. Also working on those plexiglass dividers and such in rooms. Some of the rooms that building have flexible furniture, so tables where we need some more of the dividers and that sort of thing. So taking care of that at each of the buildings. He also mentioned recently, I think it was last week, was police officer awareness or something like that. They did some things for Officer Van Louie, our school resource officer. They had cards and invited her over, and the kids kind of celebrated her last week. So some fun things there with her. She's a great resource for our students. He also talked about Southview in his report. He and Amanda Grenauger have been putting a lot of work into helping pick things out and figure out how we're going to make that building function with the second, third, and fourth grades together. They last week started assigning classrooms for teachers, so teachers are picking out rooms. One of the exciting things with the big conversations there is those 4 rooms on the end that kind of flank the library. There's those 4 rooms that have a whole wall of windows, but not everybody gets one. So teachers got to kind of put their name in a hat if they wanted one of those rooms, and they drew out who was going to get those. I haven't heard the results, but I know they had a number of teachers interested in those rooms. And they've got different furniture samples such as teacher desks, chairs, that sort of thing that they've had coming in and setting up, and teachers are trying out as they selecting what goes in there. So some fun things happening with that. The other thing he mentioned, I know Dion and Pete and Amanda has spent a lot of time talking about playground. The big piece of an elementary school too is having that in place, and pretty exciting to pick out playground equipment and lay that out. So that is coming, that conversation is going real well too. Hope to have renderings soon of what this could look like. And that's, I think, one of the things we'll talk about at Mock next week. So middle school, Mary Kay mentioned conferences coming up for the 8th grade students. We talked about registration earlier. Registration for 8th graders is a big one, picking those first classes for high school, and just it's going to look a little different this year. It's going to be some YouTube pre-recorded sessions for parents and students to watch, so they get the information to select classes for 9th grade. She also mentioned the middle school spelling bee. That looks different this year as well, but students still could participate. And that was all done virtually this year. Student council has been active at middle school as well. One of the things that they called out in the report this month was a positivity activity where they put positive Post-it notes up on the wall in the academic wings. The student council wrote over 100 positive notes, and then kids could take one, just like a pick me up during the day. And then she said they saw kids even adding other ones to the wall throughout the time. So it was a fun activity for the kids there. High school, Brian mentioned On to College. That's an ACT prep course that we've done for the last, I'm thinking 4 or 5 years now. It's been a few years we've offered that. Been a good resource. We've seen improvement in our ACT score since we started doing that program. So they've started to gear up for that. The ACT, the statewide ACT exam is scheduled for March 30th. We've had a lot of changes the last few months with ACT schedules just because of the pandemic, and doing the test with the ACT restrictions has been difficult. So hoping to be able to do that March 30th at any rate. And then the On to College looks different this year too because it's virtual than last year, but that's something that has started. He also mentioned in his kind of calling out a CTE class. We talked about some CTE programming this year. In second semester, we're starting a course that we worked on last year setting up. We have three students that have signed up for an Exploring Aviation course. So that's a new one this year. We didn't have enough to run it ourselves at our location, but we're partnering with some other school districts. These students will take the class through Minnesota River Valley Collaborative. They attend 2 times a week via Zoom, and then they actually work out of the library and a lot of self-paced things. So they get the classroom component of the aviation course done. And then they could, following that, if they want to go do the actual, I'm going to call it behind the wheel because I can't think of the name, but actually get in the plane and learn to fly. So that's pretty exciting. That's kind of a fun course that's new. We have about 6 different high schools. We met off and on throughout the year last year, putting that course together and developing that. So exciting to see that come together. Maytech, she talked about project success. K through 4 came back, and then when we came back after Christmas, so January 4th that started. And then January 11th with middle school when they came back into hybrid. Emily Carroll is still coordinating that program. That's going really well. Getting that all organized, and kids are getting that extra support that they need, especially after some of the missed learning opportunities we've had this year. She also called out Living on Your Own as a course they offer at Maytech, where they're tracking, evaluating spending habits and some of those things, preparing kids for when they move out after high school. Activities, Bruce talked about student participation numbers, and we're back, actually practices going again and stuff, which is really good with activities. The numbers are good across the board for all of our winter activities. He says we're fortunate to have an engaged student body as well as exceptional leaders in all of our programs, so students can pursue the various interests, develop life skills, and compete at highest levels. Really nice to see those things back in place. And as we get more kids back in the building and more things going, hope to continue to expand opportunities for kids, whether it be through our activities department or through other opportunities using our facilities, that sort of thing too. Something we're continually reviewing and want to open it up, but we want to be cautious and do it in time that makes sense too. He also mentions after the pause, everything getting back in place on January 4th, High School League has adjusted winter calendar activities, but not reduced the number of contests. So that's nice for students too, any more than what it already was. Basically, the guidelines look the same in winter as it did earlier as far as how many contests per week and how many people can come watch the different contests. Also want to call out the AAA award winners this year. So seniors Morgan Hart and Benson Keeker were chosen to represent our Marshall Public Schools. These 2 individuals have demonstrated excellence in each of the outlined criteria for the AAA. Their applications have been submitted along with others to the Region 2 AA, and these students and their parents will be attending a banquet at Gustavus in February where the region winners will be announced. So if you see Morgan or Benson or their families, congratulate them. It's a pretty big honor for them. Special ed, Jackie talked about, she's been connecting with special ed staff, working on adjusting service schedules to the return to more in person. We had staffed paraprofessionals based off the hybrid needs, so trying to figure out how we make that work. Now come back full face to face means more kids in the building and potential for more need. So she's been working that piece out with kids out here 5 days a week. She also mentions that she is now working on starting to think about next year and what staffing needs might look like. Certainly a challenge with that when we have grade levels shifting different buildings, it's going to mean some staffing changes there too with the teachers and with the paras, and she's trying to plan for that. We've also, one of the challenges that we're seeing right now is evaluations have been really hard through hybrid and through distance learning. So identifying kids that might be in need of some of those special services, we feel we're going to see more evaluations requested as we get more kids back, and we have a better feel for that because our numbers have been lower in that the past few months. So something we're watching pretty close, and that can certainly skew our needs for staffing down the road if they haven't qualified yet, but they might when they're back. So some challenges she's facing that she's working through. In Beth's report, Director of Teaching and Learning, she mentioned the cohort 3. So we're training the new teacher training center. It's the peer mentorship piece that we've had for the last couple of years. Beth and I did the first cohort. One of the best trainings I've ever done. Just really learning about how to help mentor peers and give valuable feedback on instructional coaching pieces. We have our 3rd cohort going through that program this year. Emily Carroll from Parkside, Kayla Kapitsky from the middle school, Mary Kay Thomas, Amanda Grenauger, Darcy Love, and Amanda Peterson. So getting our administrators through that too, just that idea when you're giving the evaluative feedback, even having that background understanding of how to do the instructional coaching is huge. So really good to see them going through that. They recently completed their 3rd round, and there's 4 in the first year. So they will get that done. Theirs looks a lot different than ours did because everything's virtual now, but still getting that background built for all these staff. She also mentioned in her report that the second Staying Connected, this was our EL event for families. That actually took place this last Saturday, and they walked through the access or the EL testing and explained that to the parents, answered questions they had. They ran different sessions for each of our different language needs that we have in our district. So the parent student connectors were a big part of running that as well. And a lot of question answer, and the feedback on that was very positive. Deanne, that brings me to yours.
A few things to cover. Be watching, we'll be doing the food service RFP this year. The 4 years are up that we're able to renew that contract. So Jill and I started the process. There's a lot of back and forth with MDE, with the RFP together, send it to them for approval. We'll send it for you guys to approve us to go out for RFP. Once that goes out, we'll get the bids. Once we get the bids, we have to approve the bid and go out for contract, and we approve the contract, and then you guys approve the contract. So it's quite the process. We're hoping to have everything done and approved by May. I think last time we had the bid process, there was three vendors that put in a bid. Lunch counts, I know you guys are interested in those. We're holding right around that 1,500 now that we're back in hybrid. Our meal distribution numbers are right around 120. They're not a lot coming to the door, which more kids we get in school will be better. So the 26, we should probably see those numbers go up. Just wanted to mention, we last year had Senator Downs to aims to introduce a bill that had been passed prior for many other public schools. The supplies and materials that we purchase, or that the construction company purchases, were sales tax on that. The only way we can get by with that is if we were to purchase it and store it, which is not something we want to do for a project like that. So last year he introduced that bill. It did not get very far. They did contact us again this year and asked if we wanted it introduced with the dates that are on the bill. It totally fits in with ours. So they'll introduce it again. Jeremy and I are gonna put together a letter of support to mail into them. But if you get a chance, just to email Senator Dames about that, just to advocate for that, to possibly save the school district about $700,000 in sales tax. Again, it was passed, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago for Minneota for their project. I can't remember how much money they saved on theirs, but So it's not a new thing. It is a tough one. I did contact MREA, who's back when I was on the board, supported this concept, and they said that they support this bill too. So we'll put that in our letter, see if I could see any traction there. Construction, like Sarah had mentioned, we'll have a block meeting next Tuesday. We'll look at some of the playground equipment. We'll talk about where we're at, furniture. They did gain a little ground on the project itself. Moved the needle back a couple of weeks, which is good. We got one of the brick walls is near completion on the outside. They put up some additional brick walls inside, a lot of the steel studs, HVAC units, plumbing. Jeremy and I were out there about a week ago. It's coming along. There's a lot of workers out there, a lot of noise, which is good. So we've only had really 1 day setback last Friday with the storm, but otherwise good. And we're having our weekly meetings. So all I have.
Spencer?
So for the high school, winter's activities are starting back up. The knowledgeable varsity season is actually starting virtual. The middle school winter activities are starting as well. Parkside conferences are on the 28th. For all schools, the end of the quarter is the 21st. There's no school the 22nd or 25th, and the new quarter starts on the 26th. And then I also just wanted to talk about the leadership conference because Ian and I actually got the opportunity to attend it on Thursday, and we both really enjoyed it. I personally enjoyed it because I liked how her topics really revolved around equity for people of color. And I think that's really important to talk about today as recent events. And I really liked how she talked about we had to appreciate and learn about others' differences, whether it was about different beliefs or cultures or different like physical appearances. So I really enjoyed that. So I'm glad I got the opportunity to end it.
Thank you. Moving on to our discussion to close the Marshall Child Care Center.
Should be on pull the presentation up. I'm going to start with just acknowledging this is not an easy conversation for any of us. Been a lot of difficult conversation around this and looking at a program that we all know is a very high quality program. We know we have great staff at this program. They do a great job at this program. And I think a lot of the outreach, I'm sure we've heard from families since our board agenda came out last week and started talking with staff last week about this presentation. It's acknowledging that. So parents see it, and I think we know that. So I just want to call it out ahead of time that I'm very much aware of that. We know there's a lot of value in this program. Also, as we're looking at our budget and our current deficit, we're deficit spending to the tune of almost $500,000. We just need to think about all of our different programs and what we're doing and how that's working, and looking at the overall financial picture of our district too. So that's, the conversation has been taking place for a while about the daycare. We've talked at our financial oversight committee about this program and looked at it this year, and we did some evaluation of kind of what's going on and what are some opportunities for us. So I'm going to walk through just some of the steps and some of the discussions we've had. Dion, jump in at any time if I'm missing something. If you have other questions, we can talk about them as we go through here too. So first thing I have up here is current enrollment in the daycare. So we have the different rooms, spots available. With this, I just want to point out the ratios are set by the state. In order to be licensed for those rooms, there's teacher to student ratios that we have to adhere to. With infant rooms, the ratio is 1 to 4. So we're licensed for 2 teachers, so up to 8 kids, that room is full. Toddlers, the ratio is 1 to 7. We're licensed for 2 in that room as well. So we can have up to 14. We're at 10 currently. These numbers were as of probably 2 weeks ago when I pulled these. We had pulled them earlier in the year too, and they were similar. So there's certainly some fluctuation with ours, with other daycare numbers. We get to those too, but pretty consistent with there. Preschool rooms, the ratio is 1 to 10. We're licensed for up to 2. We've got 14 in that room right now. And our school age room, the ratio there is 1 to 15. So we're licensed for 1 teacher. We've got 5 students. That room always tends to be a little smaller. It's typically students that have been there throughout from infancy on up. And some of us in this room have used this daycare. No, they do a really nice job, and that's why we continue to use that. But just want to explain kind of why those ratios are where they are, why the spots filled. Kind of that's where it goes.
Before you go on to the next one, a question had come up, what if we were able to fill all the spots? And I pulled up an email because we had asked kind of what the trend was for the difference. And sorry, it's not on here, but the highest numbers we had was back in the 17-18 school year, the most recent high numbers we had. Infant was 8, toddler was 11, preschool was 18, and school age was 10. I do know the school age trend has then after that been 5 to 8, and a lot of the reason, and this is not, the YMCA has a great program. They have a great facility, and a lot of the school age kids have gone that way instead of attending the LATEC or the child care program. But the reason I point that out is the preschool was near capacity, infant was capacity, toddler was 11 out of 14, and the school age was 10 out of 15. So the next slide that Jeremy shows is the, if you look at the 2018 year, and this is before we made one of the adjustments to the teacher, those deficits spending 60,000, even with our numbers close to capacity. So I just wanted to point that.
Okay. This shows revenue expense history over the last 5 years for the daycare, and I won't read through all the numbers, you can see them. I do want to point out just a couple things with here. So 2020, that was our last year. Certainly that was a much bigger deficit that year. We also had COVID last year, so we know that's a big factor in last year. That's why we want to show the 5 years back. Is this the deficit isn't a 1 year anomaly. It's been a concern over the last few years with the daycare. This year we have run some numbers too. We're projecting about a $60,000 deficit this year, and that includes we've got some grant money beyond some COVID related grant money that's come through to help with that. That's almost $27,000. My number's right there. So
Close to 30, actually.
Right, close to 30. So the deficit's closer to 90 this year is what we're projecting for this year, with including that grant. The lease money, I listed a separate line on this. This is just to point that out because that was one of the questions we had too. The lease, that's about 3,700 square feet that we use for the daycare space. We have not done anything with that space as far as in our lease yet, but that space is another $46,000. It's not included in the revenue expense up above. That was just one of the questions about the space. If we do something with the daycare, then we'd have to address what we do with that space with our lease. I know Deanne's been in some contact with customer relations where we lease it from and open some conversation, but we can't do anything there until we know what we're doing programmatically. So this year we sat down, we've had some conversations, pulled some other community people into this conversation. We talked with representatives from the city, from the EDA, from the chamber, from the Y. Really the conversation was we've always felt there's really this need for daycare. We had a lot of conversation about need for daycare in town and saying what might be some possible partnerships or some other ideas, or what can we do what are some options we have, basically was where the conversation went. Met with these different people, talked it through, and the conversation kind of came back to, we looked at what's going on with other centers in town as well. The chamber helped us reach out to the other centers in town, so I'm not identifying by name here, but we've got 5 other centers they talked to, local centers. And the feedback we got back was that a lot of them are saying we're really facing challenges right now as well. Challenges with keeping our spots filled and with keeping a positive revenue as well for those centers. Some centers didn't have openings. A lot of them did have some openings right now. So that was a part of our conversation, a big part of our conversation when we met with them. I have visited with some of the leaders of some of those other centers as well and talked about their struggles. I say, yeah, we're really struggling right now with numbers and what to do as well. There's also a lot of home-based people in town running home-based daycares. It's harder to quantify some of that because it's just different with the home-based things. Feedback we got, this was the chamber helped collect some of this too. They said really COVID has had a big impact on daycares, all daycares in town, be it center or home-based. A lot of openings was the general theme in the feedback on that. Some of those openings are by choice. So some providers are saying, I'm worried about COVID right now. I don't want other people coming in my home, but I'm going to stay open. Some have said, I'm going to watch my kids, my grandkids, great grandkids, whatever, and not taking other people there too. So that creates openings too. A lot of them reported they're struggling with low enrollments, and some of that has to do with we have employers in town that still are working virtually, so they don't have kids in daycare. That's part of it too. We don't have an end date for COVID either. What that's going to do, so it's hard to quantify all that. We have seen providers looking for alternative employment, and we've seen applications for some of the jobs we have open. People saying they're closing their daycare and coming and looking for employment, and that was feedback from the chamber as well. Of course, there's the other side too, where some of those home people are saying we're maxed out. We have full rosters. We can't take anymore. So it's kind of a mixed bag with that. With that conversation, as we looked at that, we kind of looked at it. We came up with 3 different options, 3 considerations that we discussed, thinking would there be a private buyer or another center expanding with the feedback we got from current centers, and it didn't make sense. They said they're struggling right now, not looking for something else. We know the Y had done a study. There you on that committee. Was that 2 years ago? 3 years? It was recently.
It was a while, a few years ago.
Yeah, they had looked at possibly adding a daycare center. A lot of Ys have something like that. So we had invited them to come to the conversation, said, their big struggle at that time for them was they didn't have the space to have it. And the cost of adding the space was going to be too much. So we had some conversation on that. Would they be interested in taking over the space or running the daycare? We turn it over to them, something like that, some sort of partnership there. Initially, they had expressed some interest, and as we went through all the numbers and talked through things, they met with their executive committee and came back and said, we just can't. It doesn't make sense. So they were a no on that. The other option that we discussed was, do we look at closing the child care center? And ultimately, that's a recommendation I'm making this evening, is that we look to at least have a conversation on closing the child care center. And some pieces that we've talked about, Deanna and I have talked about, is keep it open until July 1st. The idea with this, and why we're having a conversation now with this, when we're not all completely through our budget stuff for next year, if we close the daycare, we need to give people time to find something else. It gives them 6 months to find something else, not just for families, but also for our employees. We have a number of employees that have been with us for a long time. They say they do a great job. Give them time to find opportunities within the district to move into some other position. So staff could be reassigned to positions based off seniority. And I met with the staff last week and had some conversations around this. They know what this would look like too. And we know we have non-certified openings in the district, so we feel we can find spots for them all in the district to have other employment. We could transfer them to other positions as they become available, regardless of when the time is, depending when we have where we have the most need. Families that choose to leave prior to July 1st, I also anticipate that would happen. We wouldn't hold them to the contract. We wouldn't penalize them for the contract. We're trying to give them time to find alternative care. And then excess equipment we would look at selling next fall. Kind of an overview of the conversation. I'm sure there's lots of questions.
I think one of the things that comments that came out, I know there's a group of parents and community members that are concerned and want to say, hey, can we look at some other options? Can we talk about grant writing? And, while I applaud that and appreciate that thought, the challenge is structurally, it's not working right now. And one-time grants are going to be just that, a short-term fix for really a structural problem that we've had for quite some time with that daycare. I hate having a conversation because I can empathize with those families. I mean, daycare is one of the most challenging things for families, and as parents, it bothers you and worries you the most. So it's a really tough conversation to have.
Absolutely.
I've really been struggling with it too, with all the emails we've gotten this week, and I always go back to what's best for kids, and certainly this is not best for these kids. However, the money we would save, or the money that we're losing, is a full-time teacher, basically. But on the other hand, it's a tough conversation. I don't know if we give these parents time to to find more resources to keep it open. I don't know. I don't know if we want to make it completely break even down to zero, or if we want to cut the deficit in half, or, if we give them some time to do that, if that's even, and if they do that, it can't be a one-day thing. It has to be a sustainable for the coming years, which will be tough, Like Bill said, you can get a grant, a one-time grant, but that's not sustainable, but, I don't know if we give them another month, if that would, I just don't know.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, I think a lot of you will probably remember, I was thinking about it, how many were on this board 10 years ago, right, Jeremy?
I was
This
at MEC at the
happened
time, yeah.
before, yeah. And I,
You back here.
full disclosure, I was one of those parents that fought, I think, to keep this resource in our district. And I have been doing a lot of thinking since getting the report. And, part of what I think we pride ourselves on in Marshall is innovation. And if you think back to how MATEC was started and how that daycare was started as a community need, student need partnership, it's really a phenomenal story. And 10 years ago, we faced this same question of a budget deficit. A group came together, was able to come up with a solution. I'm not sure, because I don't think there's been a lot published, at least from what I'm hearing in comments and from what I've seen in the public sphere for those 10 years until now, about this kind of idea of we just can't maintain this, we can't sustain it. And looking at these numbers, my first inclination was, oh crap, this isn't good, right? But as I've seen the comments come in and I thought about it and I've looked at some of these budget things, to me, it would be a travesty, in my opinion, to lose it without an opportunity to vet exactly the issues you're talking about. And from one of the emails, I don't know how many of you saw it, I think it came in at 4:00 this afternoon, talked about the professional organizations that some of these people have reached out to. And it's more than, I think, just parents. There's also Southwest Initiative Foundation. They have actually a person that just deals with childcare concerns. They're not Joe Schmo like I was 10 years ago saying, oh, how can we do this? The idea that it isn't, and I would agree, I don't know that profitability is an issue, although there was an article in the Star Trib yesterday that talked about a franchised Spanish immersion childcare where they're literally selling these franchises for $800,000, right? There are solutions to either make it somewhat profitable or break even, or if this were costing us $10,000 a year, would we even be having a conversation of getting rid of it because of the positive community and teacher and student benefit, right? But to allow those conversations to at least have time to take place, it's already been announced to the parents, they're done July 1st. So I don't know what the harm is of tabling a decision on this for 30 days. Having maybe a liaison from the district to this parent group, I'd be happy to give up time to do that and stress the idea that this isn't a one-off. It can't be a one-year fix. It's got to be a detailed idea of what this would look like, and then bring that to the board and then be able to have a more meaningful conversation. Because I think what I'm missing in the conversation, with no disrespect to anyone, is we have 3 years, it looks like, on the budget that Dion sent, where there was a significant loss. It looks like there was a rejigging of some of the numbers leading up into the year where we had all the snow days, and then we have COVID. So I don't know how realistic, looking at 2 years where there's been really bizarre circumstances, 3 years where that budget wasn't jigged or looked at in that way, but then also looking at what could be a community parent partnership. I just would love, I would appreciate being able to at least give people that opportunity. I think it allows for us to have a much more educated position to make this decision that is going to impact a lot of people. Not only, I think about these families, and Bill, you're right, childcare is the hardest thing. And, this idea of how many spots are available, they're not the same spots that we offer here. And so to me, it's not an apples to apples. Just because there may be some availability, it doesn't mean it's what our community could offer or should offer. Not only that, we have 11, I think, teachers who utilize the childcare. Again, we talk about teacher retention. We talk about how to make our district appealable to new teachers and people coming into the district. I just see there being opportunity if at least we check it. And if it comes back that says, hey, this doesn't work, there's absolutely zero way to get over this $50,000 deficit each year, then I would fully be supportive of probably discontinuing, although it's still break my heart for our school, for our innovation, for our those programs that really set us apart. But also from a standpoint of our community, we talk a lot about building more community school partnerships. And this is a community need, albeit, people can disagree and it might be cyclical, feast and famine, but it is a need. We hear it from employers, we hear it across the board, not just for childcare, but quality childcare. And I look at my 3 kids, and I'm sure, I would think Jeremy probably does too. They're a testament. It wasn't just my husband and I that made them now the 8th graders and junior they are. It was the fact that they are graduates of that program, and not every kid can take part in it. And I understand that. And those are all things that should go into the conversation of the budget and how this happens. But I applaud these parents for coming forward and at least offering to do the legwork. And if it does come out that it's unsustainable, then we have to make that hard decision. But I'm not willing where this is at today to say that it's entirely unsustainable.
I don't want to overstep. I just want a couple of points on that. So this is actually a 6-year look, and I know we've got some of those factors in there. 10 years ago, this was looked at. Now we've got 6 years of deficit. So whatever the fix was 10 years ago, and I'd have to look back at that. Wasn't it, or it was overlooked. You're talking an average $60,000 a year. That's just the one thing. And then the other thing is with all due respect to the parents, is this isn't just an average daycare. This is a daycare that we have the daycare aides and the support staff agreement that are part of a certain pay level that other daycares don't pay. They get benefits. Other daycares don't have their workers getting benefits. So as we look at a solution in this, that really has to come into play, that the expenditures, like Jeremy had pointed out with the licensure, there's not a lot of cut room. And I would say too, whether you table or not, that's the board's decision. The longer we wait, the longer we are putting families and staff into a place where they might not have a position or a place to put their kids. So if we look at a 30-day or whatever you guys decide, what that solution is, you're not going to get legislation in 30 days. I don't know that you're going to get a grant answer in 30 days. We can relook at this whole program. But I'm just saying that it's not a 2-year look of COVID and snowstorm. This is a 6-year look at this.
I don't disagree, but there was budget moves made 2 or 3 years ago.
There was a budget move, and honestly, this is my fault. We put 50% of the teachers' wages into Fund 4. That's still wages that really should be in this budget, but we took it out because it's in Fund 4 instead of Fund 1. So if you look at the total budget, you really could add another 25 to 30,000 on top of that deficit. We moved it out of this program into ECFB because that's where it fit, and we had fund balance there to do it. Still an expenditure to it. So it wasn't really a move. It was moving from one fund to another.
But you also have those, 14 preschool students that then are there going to be spots within the program to generate that revenue within VPK and all that kind of stuff. So I hear what you're saying. I don't know why it wasn't looked at for 6 years, 8 years, whatever, but I'm hearing this the first time tonight, being asked to consider this. And that's whatever that may be, that's.
Can I speak?
Yep.
Okay, since I'm the historian. This program started off out when MECLA started for unwed mothers to have their kids so they can still go to school. And it morphed into a full-time daycare center. This board member has requested to get the deficit for the daycare center under control for the past 8 years. And that's probably why they shifted some money from one fund to put it in there. Nationally, and especially in our state, daycare is a problem. There's a shortage. Why is it a shortage? It's due to the regulations by the state. Employers don't want to do it because it's not profitable. As a school system, we shouldn't be doing it because we're locked into paying retirement income, insurance, health and life insurance, higher wages than what the private daycares do. I think one private daycare is paying $9.70 an hour, where we have to start anybody out at 15, 16 bucks an hour. That's just the law. We have to do that because we fall under the guidelines of the state. The best solution I see is to have a private entity run this and own it. It's like how I think SMSU set up that way. They have a fund where I think you supply the maintenance of the building and give them a stipend, and then they actually own the business itself. And they can run it, and I'm pretty sure that one is profitable. I know that I followed the University of Minnesota has been trying for 3 years to get out of their daycare program. And they just cannot find a way to get out of it due to lobbying of teachers and that people that use it and stuff like that. They're trying to work on a solution the past 2.5 years to what can we do, because we're losing thousands and thousands of dollars on this. Has to be a better solution, and they haven't come up with a solution. I know administration, we've had 3 administrators, our superintendents look at this, and none of them have been able to come up with a solution how we can curtail the loss of this. So I'm thinking, my first thought, you give a month to come up with a solution. If we haven't been able to come up with a solution for several years, I don't see how a group's going to come up with a solution. They can't volunteer help. They can't get a grant. A grant's probably a year away, even if you get one. The state's not going to help you because the state's the problem. So that's just a little history of that. I mean, it's a bad deal. What do you do? I mean, there's really not a solution because they've been trying to figure this out for several years. Because I know every budget, probably for the past 6 or 7 years, I brought to the attention of the business manager, and you can call Bruce Lampert and ask him, it goes, what are we going to do about this huge deficit we keep on running at the daycare center? And their only solution was to do the shift.
Or increase rates. And I will say too, I think it was 2 years ago when we increased the rates every year, 10 cents, but every time we increase the rates, we lose people. When you see the numbers that we're not able to fill, it's because of our rate, what we charge them. The more we have to increase that, we're going to lose that. We're not going to, that increase is not going to offset the losses that we get. 10 cents per hour is not going to offset. So, we can sure dig in even more. I just don't see where we're sitting that have a certified teacher and our rate set, pay set for our daycare aides, number of our daycare aides that we need to have in there. The benefits, really, the expenditures are not there. So if we're digging into the expenses, there's nothing really that we can touch on that end of it. It would have to be on the revenue side. And the only thing I can say is we're going to be able to get a $40,000 grant every year. We do grant writing. And we're lucky if we get $2,000, $3,000 grants. I mean, there are bigger grants out there, but they're not done in 30 days.
I have sat on that finance committee for a couple of years, and we have talked about this issue a lot. Matt and Bill and Dion and Scott and Jeremy and I have all sat in there and pulled our hair out on this thing. I mean, we have a great program. There's no question about it. That's why we're sitting here having this difficult conversation. Because that daycare does a terrific job and that staff does a wonderful job. The challenge that I see is exactly what Dion is pointing out. If we raise rates, we're bound to lose people. That doesn't help. That doesn't help our cause. We tried that a couple of years ago. If we try to sell it privately, a lot of those people that are running that daycare probably are not going to be running that daycare. They're probably going to stay with the school district employment. That would imagine. I don't know that there's an easy answer to this. And, you know, I have friends that go to this daycare, and I've been approached by many of them since this came out last week. And I hate having that conversation with them because the ones that are really in need are the infant spots. If you really hear them talk and looking at the presentation that you gave, Jeremy, we have 8 infant spots. We're showing 7 vacant at daycare centers in the city. I mean, that's a challenge. That's a problem because those spots are going to fill quickly. And I don't know. I just don't see an easy solution. I don't know that a month or 30 days or 6 weeks or 2 months does anything except put those families in a bigger bind. Just because they're going to it's going to close that window off.
Yeah, I would just, you took my points, Jeff. I served on finance and oversight, a couple of years ago, and we looked at that budget every year. It's been a problem. We haven't had a solution. I think really the only solution is really privatization, just because of our personnel is unfortunately where all of our expenses, and that's the challenge. It's just a model that's not sustainable. So looking for a short-term fix is probably just kicking the can down the road.
But if the families are the ones that want the time to look into this, why not give it to them? You say they know it could close July 1st,
And they may even realize it's likely it's
And
going to
they
close
may-
July 1st.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
Why not give them till our second meeting in February to see what they can come up with? If they still know it's going to be July 1st, we're not pushing the closing date back to August 1st.
So the solution, are they gonna be able to, just play the devil's advocate, because there's a great program, and I honestly hate to see it go to. It's, so they're gonna come to it, we put a postponement on this, and then they're gonna come to us, and we've got a group that's gonna write a grant. Can they come to us and say that we have 5 businesses that is gonna donate $5,000? Can they do that in 30 days? I don't see how they're gonna do that.
I don't know, we'll see.
If they do that,
We did a lot 10 years ago.
I guess we need more than just 1 year sustainability.
I don't disagree, but they'll know that. I mean, that has to
Yeah,
be
they
clearly
know.
communicated.
They're willing to do this.
And I question, you may have met as committees. I don't think there's enough understanding in the community what that meant to the actual stakeholders. Were they ever offered 5 years ago when you guys were lamenting this issue to be approached and say, we need ideas, we need solutions, we need your input, we need to know how this is going to work. You know what I mean? I think it's one thing to say up here, there were a lot of conversations. What conversations were on the ground for these
there was a
folks?
lot of conversations with our industry council, the YMCA, with us that are put in charge of the finances. But you want us to postpone it so 5 or 6 parents get together and they're gonna come up with a solution.
Well, I think it's more than 5 or 6. I think it's a whole group of folks, but I'm just saying, why take away the opportunity for those players, the stakeholders to make a proposal? And maybe if it voted to close tonight and they still made that proposal, I don't know if you guys would, if it would be considered or not, but it just seems that there's going to be a lot of frustration with people not being allowed at least an opportunity to make that contribution. Understanding it's not a one-time fix, understanding the likelihood is that it will probably be closed if it's not a long-term plan to address it.
Or we could close it and if they come back with a plan to how to reopen it, if they have a solution on how it's going to reopen and how they're going to sustain it.
It's going to be harder, I think, once the decision is made, but it's obviously.
No, really, if they come back to us in 30 days and say, well, we got the money to, and this is the plan and how it's going to work, if they can do it in 30 days, what's the difference?
If we postpone it 30 days, does it change the work that you need to do as administrator?
No.
Maybe it gets it out there, maybe there's a private entity that wants to get involved. Would we entertain subsidizing a private entity that wanted to take it over, maybe a model similar to SMSU, where we've got a fixed amount that we subsidize it with, commit to it, but the operation becomes a private entity. Yeah, there's space there, there's equipment there. You know, maybe there's some type of arrangement that a private entity is interested in that maybe wasn't part of earlier conversation. Maybe 30 days will identify that, uncover that.
Did anybody else come up besides the Y as far as taking it over?
There were a couple others that I talked about, had looked at one time. Schwann's was mentioned, had looked at one time, but I understand there's no longer interest there.
It is a tough time for private entities to look at it right now, given the reality of COVID. I mean, just being honest.
Oh, for sure. I think that's what's difficult too, in terms of just the whole gamut of everything. Nothing is set for anyone right now, whether it be a childcare center, a law firm, a school district. There's so much upheaval. And that's my other fear for closing it now, with there being really limited opportunity because of COVID with available childcares, finding those places. I mean, it's just adding one more layer of upheaval and uncertainty at a time that seems hard to add to that.
But not being able to have this conversation with the public present is difficult. I feel bad about that because we can't downplay the amount of responses we got here the last few days. I mean, that's important to hear, so. Mr. Chair, I would make a motion that we table this action. We don't even have a motion on the floor.
This is
It's coming up
discussion.
later,
It's
so.
coming up. So. Okay.
So if you do that, I'm only to postpone and not table.
Any more discussion before we move on? Moving on to discussion items are first review of policies 518 to 523. Any comments?
Just with these, I lost track for a second. Title IX was majorly rewritten this fall, so this is just, it's in the cycle now again. So that's probably the only one with any changes in here, and that was just updated this fall.
Okay, and we'll move on to the next action item is authorization to close the Marshall Area Child Care Center. And how should we arrange that if we're going to postpone? Do we have to open it up and then postpone it?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion that we postpone any action on the Marshall Area Child Care Center until the regular board meeting in February.
Second.
Any other discussion on that? Hearing none, we'll have to do a voice vote, is that correct?
I just can't take that.
Well, I have confidence in you, Tricia.
Do you guys see that on your screen?
Yep.
And that's the second meeting in February, right?
Yep.
Everybody understands.
So that would be,
Still need the motion.
Bill and then Sarah, and on this, and further discussion, Sarah, you want to be the go-to person for committee?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
contact, okay? So,
I might be emailing Deanna a little bit, but I'll try to keep it succinct.
well, instead of having to go to 4 or 5 different people, we can come towards one.
Yep.
Any other discussion?
I would just add to it, we need to have some type of public meeting and probably even do it in a Zoom format. I think we should offer that up to the community and certainly those families that are minimal. We can facilitate that.
And just so the families understand, we've been trying to figure this out. It's not that we're trying to penalize them. We all believe it's a good program. We just, as a school district, can't keep on pouring more and more money at it, so. And they have to understand that we did have a $30,000, was it a $30,000 grant that was, or
Through the state, yeah.
through the state, or, so actually the deficit would have been 90,000 more
For this coming,
for this coming year, so we're at 90,000 deficit probably projection for this year
Without that. grant.
without that grant, yeah. We'll go ahead and vote.
Just to clarify, the February regular meeting is the second, right?
Second, correct.
Making sure.
It's on the 16th, I believe.
And I'd like to compliment the board on the discussion on that. Move on to the approval of the budget parameters, motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second,
Open for discussion.
We had discussed this with the finance committee and apologize, this was usually approved, I think, in January, the first meeting, but, the budget parameters we went over. Enrollment, with what's happening and the unknown for next year, basically with the preliminary budget that we'll be working on very soon to present to you guys as an overview, not for approval, but just an overview for you, for the board. We're going to hold the enrollment steady, kind of seeing a little increase, I think, from last year, but not from what we've seen in prior years. So we'll hold enrollment steady. General fund, I updated the fund balance projection from the revised budget, going from 16.5 from previous year to the 15.16%. If everything holds true from the revised budget for 2021. Personnel costs, all the contracts have been settled. For the non-certified, we still have our annual individual contracts, some 3-year contracts, and then the EA, the teacher's contract coming up. Otherwise, everything else is settled, so we'll just plug in those numbers. Probably the big one is just kind of scrolling down to the bottom. It's the same as the state funding for the general fund. Talked to the finance board, really a lot of unknowns with legislature this year, with the states looking at a surplus for this year, but then a pretty big deficit for next year. Decided to plug in a 1% increase for 21-22. We hope it's at least a 2%, if not higher, but again, not knowing what's going to go through legislature with COVID and the deficit and everything, we just want to be safe on our projections there. That, and we'll try to put any kind of projections we can with COVID. I know last year, the original, we had hopes that everything would be returning to the same, so we'll put some of that in there. We'll hopefully know if there's a second round. There is a second round of CARES Acts coming. We'll plug that in and try and put some numbers in there. Hopefully that will help with some of our deficit spending in that. But otherwise, everything is somewhat the same. You guys approved the 10-year long-term facilities. So that's basically laid out. We're pretty fortunate with that and how the construction projects are going. There's more about that. So some of the facilities in the full bond as the construction projects get closer to the end of what we can use those funds for to get ahead on our facilities. Any questions on that?
Questions? Hearing none, we'll vote. Is approved. Approval of the bids for the Parkside and middle school air quality improvements. Do we have a motion?
So moved. I'll second.
Open for discussion.
We had our bids go for the IAQ project at the middle school in Parkside. We had 2 bids come in, Shasta Central and Bisbee's. Bisbee's came in lower, the local vendor working on that project. We had a few alternates that we're recommending to the board. One, we're actually just putting one in there, and that's to replace the boiler. It was part of our LTFM project anyway. To put it in this project so we can get the chiller, the boiler, and the IAQ all done at Parkside, 30-year-old building. And then the IAQ project down here in the gym locker room and the pool area. Bids came in well, I will say. We will have some conversations. We had some conversations with ICS where we feel that not only will it be met with our funding, but we'll probably be able to get underneath that plus some different techniques. That'll definitely involve you guys. But
That 30-year building, 30-year building. That copper filling in that cafeteria held up.
one thing at a time.
Any other discussion on that? Call a vote. Approval of superintendent's of schools contract for 2021 to 2024. Motion to approve.
I'll second.
So open for discussion. Hearing no discussion, we'll vote. It is approved. Thank you, board members. Meeting's over.